Hi everyone. Welcome to a new episode in the Multiverse video series. I'm Javier Luraski, and today we're going to learn how you can share datasets with your coworkers using cloud services like Amazon AWS, Microsoft Azure, or Google Cloud Storage. We are going to accomplish this with the pins package. Now, if you don't know what the pins package is, you can go backwards in our videos and just kind of like quickly watch our recording on that introduces the pins package. Just as a quick refresher in case you've seen it but you don't remember what the pins package does, it's basically an R package that allows you to cache remote resources locally very easily, and it also allows you to discover and share resources with others. So for instance, a resource could be a dataset, which is what we're seeing here, and you can just easily retrieve a remote CSV file locally, or you can use this particular dataset after doing some data analysis. You can actually push it to services like Kaggle, GitHub, or RStudio Connect. However, there might be cases where the files are huge. So suppose that you have several files with several gigabytes of on each of them, like maybe GitHub might not be the best place to put it, and neither Kaggle. And you might already have like a Google storage account or a Azure account or an S3 account where you could safely store this information and share it with others. So for these cases where you want to use a cloud service to share resources with others, you can use the pins package. And specifically, you want to use new functionality from the pins package. You might want to take a look at our recent blog post on the release of Pins 03, which basically allows you to make use of these cloud services, as we were mentioning, from Pins to create these datasets. Now, there's more resources in the actual website. So if you were to go to pins.rstudio.com, you can use the articles dropdown and either click on Azure, Google Cloud, or S3. And, you would obviously have to set up your account before using this cloud service. And you also need to create a bucket. So for instance, in this case, when you're using S3, you would have to create an S3 bucket. And then you would need to create a user with perhaps programmatic access to be able to then use the access key and secret key to access that particular account and the datasets, well, the buckets associated to this particular account. Anyways, so how does this look like? Well, first of all, let's try to look for a dataset. I'm going to use the pins package, but you can use your own datasets that you might be interested in. I'm just going to look for Seattle and open this weather dataset. Yep, that's pretty much it. So, yeah, so for this particular dataset, what do we want to do? So, actually, let's just first load pins and reload this dataset, just without using the actual library. And as you can see, what this dataset contains apparently is a set of temperatures per day and what's the weather like on Seattle. All right, so with this dataset, like usually what you would do some interesting data science on top of this, some analysis with dplyr, why not? That's not the point of this video. So what I'm gonna do instead is, first of all, I'm gonna get the dataset, weather Seattle, and as you can see, this is really fast, even though this potentially could be getting re-downloaded from CRAN, since the pins package caches your datasets locally. You don't need to worry about that. So let's try to do some very simple data science kind of like transformation here, just for the sake of showing it on this video. So let's suppose that we're only interested in figuring out what are the rainy days in Seattle, so we can use dplyr to easily filter that out, right? So we can just say filter weather equals rain. So that should be enough. Now, what is no, there you go. All right, so what we want to do in this case potentially is share our results with a coworker. And this data set might be pretty large, or we might be encouraged to actually use our cloud services for this particular reason. So S3 to share it with others. So actually, before we do this, let's just make sure that the query works. And yeah, we have less rows. We only have 249 from the particular rainy days. And then what you want to do is connect to this particular board. If this is the first time that you're doing this, you can also use the pins add-in and select S3 and then specify your bucket and your key to kind of like auto-generate the code to connect. In this particular case, I've already done it in the past, so I'm just gonna rerun this. All right, so now we're connected to this remote bucket, and the bucket is empty, but we can already start pushing our data analysis to S3. So what I'm gonna do in this case is use the filter dataset, and I'm just gonna push it to S3. And we want to give it a name, perhaps. So we're gonna call it rainy, and we want to specify which board we're using as destination, which in this case is S3. And that's pretty much it. Or maybe not. All right, in this case, we got an error, which oh, yes. So one of the things that you want to be aware of, which we actually mention in the documentation, I believe we mentioned it somewhere in here. Yeah, so what happens is that I just created this bucket in S3 before this video started. Here, this is the thing that you want to be aware of. Please notice that after creating a bucket, it can take several minutes for this bucket to be usable. Yes, that is completely correct. That's just the way S3 works. And I just happen to have created this new bucket. So what we're going to do instead is we're going to rerun this. Let's start all over. And what we're going to do instead is we're going to use the bucket that I've already created in the past, which the bucket is called rpins. That's pretty much it. And then I'm going to connect. Yeah, so, sorry about that, but, if we were to wait like a few more minutes, it might have just worked. But in this case, we'll just use an existing one. Right, so this is our existing bucket. And we're going to repeat the same thing. We're going to do our data analysis. In this case, we're interested only in rainy days. And then we're going to pin it to S3 as rainy, or as the rainy dataset. All right, so now you can see here that we have this rainy dataset. Let's see. And we should be able to open it, which is exactly the same dataset. And the interesting thing here is that if we were to go to the management console and look for rpins, we should be able to see here the rainy dataset, which is just here. And we could do something else. We could create a sunny dataset. Is that how it's called? No, I think. Wait. Well, one should be. Well, we can just call snow. We can create another dataset which is called snowy. Let's try that. Oh, let's see. What have I done? Oh, wrong board name. Let's try this again. So now we'll pin a different dataset called snowy, which we should be able to get here with only the snow related information. And then if we go back to our bucket, we should see, you may have to refresh it. Yeah, you would see here that there is a snowy kind of like entry for that particular dataset. Right, that's pretty cool. Now, the great thing about pins is that you can use the same interface to connect to multiple cloud services. So suppose that we want to connect to Google Cloud. Again, you can go and look at the documentation on how to use Google Cloud. The thing to notice about Google Cloud is that it's actually a little bit different. The recommended way of using Google Cloud is to install the GCloud kind of like CLI. You basically need to go to developers.google.com/. Oh no, actually that's not what you want. You actually might want to yeah, you want to go to this particular link, Google Cloud SDK, and you want to install it. That's pretty much it. You also need to configure it by running gcloud init, I believe. And yeah, so yeah, the disadvantage of this is that you need to install the Google Cloud SDK. The advantage is that you don't need to worry about like saving or transferring those secrets. Anyways, but once you have it set up, it's actually pretty easy to connect. As you can see here, there's not even a secret, which is great. And then we connect, and we're basically now in business with Google Cloud. And we're going to do the same thing. We are going to look at this particular bucket. Oh, actually, let me check if I connect to the right bucket. I believe I did. All right, so let's do the same thing. But now to make things a little bit more interesting, we can also get the we can actually get the dataset from S3, right? The Snowy dataset from S3, and we can pin it to let's just also call it Snowy, and we'll pin it in this case to Google Cloud, GCloud. And this should work. It's actually not even downloading the dataset from S3 since it's already cached. It's just making sure that it's up and current. And now it has been updated to in Google Cloud. And we have a Snowy dataset here again. All right, this is great. And we should be able to see it here if we refresh the bucket. All right, so here we have the Snowy dataset with all the information associated to it. And now we can do the same for Azure. And again, you can, to configure Azure, you want to go to our docs and kind of like read them through. The creation is a little bit similar. You basically want to go to the Microsoft Azure account and create a storage account and then create a bucket. Sorry, it's not called a bucket. It's called a container in Microsoft Azure. And then you want to create the access keys for this particular account. Now, I already did all these for us for this particular video. Instead, what we want to do is we want to use this particular dataset and pin it into the Azure account. So what we're going to do instead is connect to Azure. And once we're connected, we can basically repeat the same process. We could actually do even something more interesting, which is pinning a dataset into S3 and then into Google Cloud, and then pinning the resulting dataset into Azure. Or we can just get it from S3 or whatever. So in this case, we could potentially just get it from any of them. Let's choose one. Let's just say pin get from GCloud, and then we'll push that dataset into Azure. Of course, I made a mistake. So let's try again. Right, so we're getting it from Google Cloud, and then we're pinning it into Azure. And that's about it. So it should be out. And if we were to look at Azure, we need to refresh, I guess. And yeah, so let's just look at the Object Explorer, I guess. I'm not super familiar with Azure these days. Maybe that's not what we want. Wait a second. That might not be what we want. Opening Explorer. No, sorry. Actually, what we want to do is just check the containers. And I believe I'm using... What's the container I'm using? So here when we connected... Oh, it's just a test container that I have here. Anyways, so now we've arrived to, same thing. We have a Snowy dataset over here, which are data with our data files. And, like the great thing about pins is that it was pretty easy to pin anything to any particular cloud provider. So for instance, let's do one more. Let's do, well, we need the dataset again. Let's just say get Snowy, and this would be our local dataset. Well, actually, this might not be our local dataset. Our local dataset is called Weather, Weather Seattle. Let's do something else. Let's look at, Oh, there's sun and rain. Okay, so let's just do something just for the fun of it. We can, we should be able to, actually, what do I want to do? Yeah, we should be able to pin the same data set to all three cloud providers. And this is not something that you would do in practice, but you can do it because it's so easy. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna pin the same data set to 3 different cloud providers. So let's do something. We are gonna get the weather, and we're gonna say pin. Oh, actually, let's just filter it because and I haven't loaded the plier, so I'll have to do filter, and then we're gonna say where weather equals sun. Oh no, I'm so bad at this. All right, let's try again. Filter weather equals sun, and then just for fun, we can now pin this, and we're gonna use the same name. We're gonna call this sunny, and we're gonna push it to the S3 board, and there we're gonna do the same, and we're gonna push it to the Azure board, and last but not least, we'll push it to the GCloud board. Yeah, that's pretty much it. So what is happening here, again, you probably won't do this in practice, but first we're filtering to all this data set of weather temperatures to only contain the sunny days, and then we're pushing that to S3, Azure, and Google Cloud as the sunny dataset. And yeah, that's pretty much it. And this is kind of like crazy. It's not like a great use case, perhaps, for pins. But what you end up getting, we can refresh here the Azure dataset, and you can see that sunny is there with only sunny weather. And we can also look at each of the cloud providers, and we should see here that we have sunny. We can also go to Azure and refresh this. Sorry, this is Google Cloud, and refresh it. Well, apparently, okay, there you go. And we have the sunny dataset as well there. And if we were to refresh this in Azure, we also have sunny. Now, what is great about this is that, you know, like if you're sharing this with coworkers, all you have to do now is, you know, they need to register the board, and now they can simply do pin get snowy and the particular board to retrieve that data set. If you also take a look at some of the previous videos from pins, you'll know that you don't need to necessarily pin only datasets. You can also pin arbitrary files, or ggplot output, or models, and why not. So there's a lot of things that you can pin. It's not restricted to datasets, but a lot of times datasets, when doing data science, is what comes handy, and what is one of the objects that you usually want to share. All right, actually, before we finish, kind of like a bonus feature from this release that is worth sharing, it's called pin info. So this is a new feature that basically what it does, if we were to look at Sunny, for instance, on the board S3, what this feature does, it shows you some of the metadata associated with this particular data set. And it works on all boards, and each board provides different functionality to it. So for instance, one of the things that we can do is we can say board register, let's say RS Connect, and then we can say board. And this is obviously dependent on you having RStudio installed, or whichever board you're using at the moment. And then you can say something like pin info, and for instance, in this case, I can say just Iris. Yeah, and as you can see, there's additional information associated to this particular board. We can also do something different, and we can connect to Kaggle. And in Kaggle, we can do something similar. Well, let's see. There's a bunch of. I don't remember exactly what these datasets are, but that's the beauty of pin info, you can basically just check out what is the metadata associated with it, assuming you are able to spell correctly. So let's try that again. And Seattle, right? Oh, no, I have two typos actually. Okay, Seattle. Yeah, Seattle sales is the name of the particular dataset. We can run pin info. And this basically what will show us is the metadata associated to this particular Kaggle board. And again, each board kind of like has different functionality, but it can be handy either to try to remind yourself what type of data is stored on that particular dataset, or just to kind of like look at a dataset or resource before it actually gets downloaded locally in your R session. All right, well, I hope this was useful, and yeah, definitely. If you hit any issues, feel free to open a GitHub issue, and we'll help you out to get you unblocked. So thanks again for watching.